Hello, and welcome again to CS298, Designing and Deploying Cloud Applications. This is week 4. Let's get started. So this week, quick feedback about the discussion homework, and then we'll talk about cloud computing cost. That's really the focus for this week. Then we'll look at this week on CS298, which is basically what the homework, their due dates are. Okay, so the what was due this week is really the discussion in terms of how many, which AWS services you think you would need for your project, and the conversation I saw there was pretty interesting, and I'm happy the way the way you guys are approaching it. I like the fact that you're already thinking in terms of security. How can you secure your application? How can you make sure that you know when people log in or when people create accounts, how to be sure that that information is not lost. I also like the fact that people start thinking in terms of, okay, what is cheaper, how can I scale, and things like that. I believe I gave a feedback to everybody that submitted, and I also graded everybody. So please, if you have any questions with regards to that, do let me know. And FYI, so when it comes to software engineering or development work, there is a whole stack of things to be done. There is a front end, there's a middle tier, there is the back end, and all that stuff. So for this particular class, we might not, of course, use all the services you guys identified, because to a large extent, there is limited. We are limited in terms of the skill sets each of you has, which is not a problem. But we'll definitely use S3 buckets for hosting static websites. I plan to use EC2, but how that works, I'm still working on the modality for that, because anyway, when we get to that, I'll have more information. Another service that we will ordinarily have needed that we will not be using, but I'll talk about it, is what is known as the root. Is the root 5, which basically is how domain names are redirected. To actually use that fully, you will need to sign up for a domain name, whether with Google or with GoDaddy or any of the services that do that. But we are not planning to spend a dime for this class, so we won't really do the actual domain name signing or sign up. But I will talk about that. I'll talk about that more to explain what's going on when we get to that. I do remember asking each of you guys to send me an email that I wanted to hear from you with regards to the fact that, do you have access to a credit card that you can use to sign up for AWS? When we get to that, you will not be charged anything. And I said this last week as well. You will not be charged. It's just to verify or to validate that, the service is not being signed up for by robots. So please, for those who have not emailed me, please kindly do that ASAP. All right, let's go to cloud computing cost considerations. And there will be a lot of different schools of thoughts on this, but I will tell you what you should watch out for. So the first thing you always want to do is evaluate your needs. You want to know, okay, what service do I provide? What will I need to be able to provide that service from a web application perspective, right? What kind of databases do I need? What kind of storage do I need? What kind of uptime do I need? Things like that. You need to evaluate what you need, because that will feed into subsequent steps. If you don't know what you need, then you cannot calculate the cost for what you need. The next thing you want to do after evaluating your needs is evaluate the options you have out there. So you know what you need. You need to know what is possible, what is available out there. Compare what services the various cloud providers provide, what services they have, what services they don't have, what are the alternatives to your needs. You might be lucky enough and everything you need is provided by one person or by one service provider, or you might be lucky enough that even though a certain service provider does not have everything you need, but they have suitable alternatives. For example, let's say you use MySQL heavily, and I'm just using this as an example, and the service provider of your choice does not really support MySQL DB, but they support MariaDB. Well, that is a good drop-in replacement for MySQL. So you might, those are the you consider that option in terms of what are the potential replacement. Okay, so now you have a certain number of options that goes with your needs. So now the next thing to do is audit your current average cost. That is, look at what you're currently spending on an average monthly or annually, because you need to know that to determine, um, where you're going to. Now, the word audit here is important because it's not just a matter of what you're spending. It's a matter of what you are spending right now that is important. Any cost that you are spending right now that is a waste, you should eliminate it. So you want to look at, okay, this is how much I'm spending on the data center, and this is how much I'm spending on servers, but we have this number of excess servers that we are not actually using, but we're carrying. You need to eliminate all those excesses. You just want to audit the current, cost that is actually um, affecting or pertaining to your business. Now, let's say you're starting your company afresh. Well, then that's not necessarily a concern because you don't have a current average cost. But assuming you are thinking of migrating to cloud computing, then yes, current average cost becomes an important thing, because in reality you don't want to go from spending, who knows, $20,000 a month well, to spending $30,000 a month. Part of the reason why you're moving to the cloud is cost saving. I mean, there are other considerations for moving to the cloud, but at the bottom of everything really is to save cost. All right. So after auditing your current average cost, you also want to estimate your current usage. Estimate in terms of, okay, how many hours am I using my database? How many hours is the database actually being used? How many hours are this servers being used? The various services that you have right now, how many hours are they being used? Because when you start calculating the cost for your cloud computing services, the number of hours becomes very important. Um, Once you have all that written down, then you can now move to estimating your cost of ownership. That is the cost of how much the cloud computing is going to cost you. Um, could be daily, could be monthly, could be annually. There are virtually every cloud provider will have a calculator, and we'll see that on the next page, that you can use to calculate your cost of ownership. But they all rely on you knowing what services you need. They all rely on you knowing your estimated usage per period. So once you have that, you can now estimate the cost of ownership. And of course, once you have an estimated cost of ownership and you have your audited current average cost, you can do a comparison to even know if does it make sense to go forward. Is it more expensive to go to the cloud than to stay local, right? And in estimating your cost of ownership, there are multiple models when it comes to cloud costing, right? There are um, you can be paying as a pay per use or pay as you go. So you pay for what you use, you pay for what you use, you pay for what you use each month, each period. Or you could sign a contract ahead of time with the provider, which allows you to get some benefits, but you have a locked in price. There are also instances where the more you use, the lower your price comes down. So um, those are various things to consider when you are actually estimating the cost of ownership. And by the time you get into this, you will have most of the time you'll have your finance department, the tech ops department, all of them putting their heads together to do this calculation for you. Could probably do it in concert with someone from the cloud providing service. Okay, then don't forget, other costs or benefits that you might be. So the fact that the numbers might not necessarily add up straight away does not mean there are no benefits in going to cloud in migrating to the cloud, and those should be factored into your cost. You also need to factor the future. So right now, maybe you're a small organization with, who knows, 1,000 users or 500 users. Well, do you plan to scale up down the line, maybe in the next 2 years? Will you have about 50,000 users? Will you have about 1 million users? Those are things you should plan ahead for. So even though the numbers might not necessarily look great right now because you don't have that much usage, but your cost benefit might come in. There might be a sweet spot when you hit about 50,000 users. And that might be when you start actually getting the cost benefit. All right. So those are some of the things you should consider when it comes to cost calculations. A lot of times, as a developer, you might not be fully involved in this process because your job is to develop code, not necessarily to do all this boilerplate work. But you will definitely be asked, okay, how many queries your application runs per request, how many API calls you make per request, because those are intricate details that gets factored into calculating costs. All right, next page. So here is an example. Now this particular example is really for if you were to sign up for a 1 year commitment with the service providers. So if you were to just look at the pricing page for AWS or Azure or GCP, you might not necessarily see these exact numbers, because what you will see publicly is really the figures for pay as you go or pay on demand usage. But this is an example where the instance type, which we have 4 instance type, that is the EC2 in Amazon's world called EC2 or compute, really. There's a general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, and then GPU instance. This is what it will look like under AWS, Azure, and Google, right? If we take compute optimized under AWS, it's called the C5 X large. A corresponding one in Amazon, what's it called? In Amazon, sorry, not Amazon. Microsoft Azure is the F4S V2, and then you have the Google version of it. To a large extent, these are estimate comparisons because the configurations within each cloud provider might be slightly different, but when you pick ranges as close to each other as possible, this is what you will likely get. Now, when you look under the cost columns here, the last three columns, it looks like for the general purpose, Google pricing is the worst, while Azure is the best, right? But the question you have to also ask yourself before you decide, oh, you know what, Azure gives me the best price in this case, so I'm going to go with Azure. Is this the only kind of compute server you will need? Because to a large extent, you won't, especially if you have a full-blown enterprise application, you will not likely use one type of compute server. You might use 3 or 4 different types of compute servers to do different things, right? And not only that, there are other services that you will use, the databases, the routes, different kinds of services that you'll use. But this gives you just one example in terms of compute server. So let's say you are using the general compute, and you're also using a GPU instance. Maybe the GPU instance is to crunch your analytical data. Well, guess what? It looks like Amazon has the best pricing for the GPU. Let me see if I can move my. How do I do this? Okay. Is this better? Either way. Okay. So it looks like for GPUs, Amazon has the best and Google has the worst. But of course, if you wanted to go compute optimized, then Google has the best. So it's a balancing act, right? And that's why you'll most likely have to do a full-blown calculation to see, okay, which one is better, not just considering one particular type of server or one type of service or one type of software. You have to do a full-blown, because the fact that who knows, Azure might be better in terms of the various compute servers does not necessarily mean they are better in terms of databases or other infrastructure that you might need. So this is an example of what it might look like with a 1-year commitment, I should say. Next page. So if you these are links on the web for each of these services or each of these cloud providers. Each of them has a page that you can go to basically do a calculation to come up with an estimate for your needs. Let's see if I were to do. Let me see if I can share my my Chrome tab. That will mean that will require that I stop sharing the slide. 1 second. Let me share my Chrome tab. So if we were to go to, I believe it's what? Calculator. Yeah, calculator.aws. Create an estimate. If you click on this button, create an estimate, it brings you here. Region, US East. You can leave this as just don't necessarily change this, just leave it as it is. Then search for find service. So here you have the list of services that AWS provide. These are services that you guys have picked up. Some of these services, not all of them, that you guys have already identified in the discussion from last week that you will need for your project. So what you could do here, and this is really what your homework for. It's not due this week. What is due this week is your design pages. Okay. This is due upper week. So that's going to be the, let me see, calendar. Where's my calendar? Um, so on the 19th, you will have the design pages due for those who have started looking at it. And then on the 26th, the homework that I'm assigning this week will be due. And it's really for you to come into calculator.aws, and for each of the services that you picked, the 3 services that you picked, go ahead and create an estimate. So here, let's say you picked EC2. Let's just say EC2. All right. This is the EC2 of interest, not this one. So configure. Let's call it EC2 estimate. Okay. Again, leave the region as is. Shared instance, we can leave that. I mean, dedicated instances are going to be more expensive. Dedicated hosts are going to be more expensive. Of course, if you're were to be running a finance or health services application, you probably want something more dedicated. But for our sake, we'll just leave it at shared instance. It says Linux, Windows, pick whichever one you want. It doesn't make a difference to me. Pick whichever one works for you. I'm going to leave it at Linux. Daily spikes, blah, blah, blah. I will leave it at constant usage, assuming, it's always up. And number of instances, let's see, let just for fun, let's pick 2. Okay. Server type. Let's pick a small one. A1. Of course, you can say how many CPUs you want. I'm going to keep it at 2. I'm going to say 1 gig. Doesn't matter. I mean, the whole idea here is just for you to get an idea. Now, that's interesting. All right, let's go back to 1. Go back to 1. Compute savings plan. I do not want to do. I don't want to do. Okay, on demand. Yeah, I don't want to do any upfront anything. So let's just leave it as on demand, right? So skip compute savings plan or EC2 instance savings plan. This is if you really want to prepay or stuff like that. But anyway, so I will leave this as on demand, 100% usage utilization per month, 100% utilization per month. And that comes to what? About 30, is that 37 plus per month? We'll leave that. And if you're paying attention at the bottom here, you have the running total. Okay. So for now, because I'm picking just 1, right? I think I changed it to 1. Yeah, just 1 EC2 instance and all that stuff. So here we can say save and add service. Okay, and you can pick another one. Let's see, what should we pick? Who knows? Let me do S3. Configure. Yeah, S3 standard. Let's leave it as that. So let's say we are storing 5 gigs of data per month. I mean, you can pick any of those values. I'm just going to leave all of this default, and I'm going to add that. So those are two things I've added. Of course, in your case, you'll be adding 3, so Elastic IP, whatever the case might be. All the services that you've picked, of course, you can add more too if you feel, oh, you know what, I didn't think about this service before, but I'm going to likely need this service. So add that to it. And then where is my view summary? That's what I was looking for. The button here, view summary. So here it's telling me, sorry, upfront cost is 0, monthly cost is 37, 12 months, that's 37.3 of 12 months is 44820. Let's do the math real quick. If we say monthly is 37.35 times 12, yep, 448, a little bit under $500 a month. I mean, a year, sorry. And you can see your breakdowns here. And for the homework, let me see, there should be a way to export this. There used to be an export button. All right, if there's no export button, you can take a picture of this and just add, use that as your submit that for your homework. But this is an example of how you'll do the calculation with AWS. Google has their own. Let me go back to the slide. And where's my slide? Okay. So Azure, this is the link for Azure. This is the link for Google. They all provide calculators to help you. We calculated 448 and some cents per month. Per year. Will that be your total cost? Not necessarily, but it gives you an idea what it will look like. So you can take a look at what your annual cost right now is, wherever you're hosting your services, whichever data center you're using, and compare it to what the cloud calculator gives you. Does it make sense? Do the numbers work for you? Of course, you can do that same calculation on Google. You can do that same calculation on Azure, or whichever ones you've identified in the previous slide. The slide here where we said evaluate your options. So you will do that same calculation with all the option, the alternative cloud providers that you've identified. And hopefully you get one that the price point works for you. But at the same time, you want to consider a bunch of other things too, not just price. Price is a good starting point. Some services might be more difficult to use than others. So those are things that you need to consider. But again, it's not going to necessarily be you that is considering that. It's going to be your tech ops guys, because they will likely be the ones, maintaining, not necessarily maintaining because the cloud provider does the maintenance, but they are the ones that will be configuring your cloud platform. Okay. So let's talk real quick about CS298 this week. The design assignment from last week is going to be due this coming Sunday. That is the 19th. I noticed only one person actually even took a look at that assignment. Well, if you do have questions, please let me know ASAP. Then for the upper week, which I'm posting it this week, but for the upper week, which is going to be the 26th, what is due is the exercise in cost estimation. And you're going to use calculator.aws and do the estimate for your service, or for the services rather, that you identify for your project. In terms, if there's any of them that is asking you how many hours you need, just pick 100% utilization or 720 hours in a month. 724 times 60, yes. So 100% utilization or 720 hours in a month. And don't be scared whatever figures it gives you. When we actually sign up for the AWS account, it's going to be the free tier, so we will not be paying anything. We will not be paying anything. But this is a good exercise for you to do, for you to go through, to have an idea what goes on behind the scenes. All right. I might not likely post a video next week, but I will most likely maybe make an announcement or something like that. And that's because I'm going to be away mid this week, and I'll likely come back on Monday next week. So I'll probably not have an opportunity to make a video like this for the upper week. But you do have enough on your plate. You have the homework that's going to be due on the 19th, and you have this new one that's going to be due on the 26th. Again, please, if you do have questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if there's anything that is confusing. And for those who do not have any experience or who are already rusty with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I hope you've been brushing that up, because sooner rather than later, we will be needing those when we start doing development for our web applications. All right. Have a wonderful rest of the week.